guys, my name's Amanda Tomlin and I own Mama's Best Food. I'm a private chef and I specialize in dietary restrictions from gluten-free to vegan, vegetarian, low sodium, low sugar, allergen-free, things along those lines. Today I wanted to talk about eating seasonally in January. It's very specific. January is kind of a tough one to get all of the produce that we're supposed to eat in a day and to find anything that's really good, especially compared to summertime when it's really plentiful with all sorts of delicious fruits and vegetables. That makes it a lot easier to add to every meal that we eat. January takes a little bit more effort, but there's a lot of really good stuff out there right now. Eating seasonally also helps us eat locally, especially in this area. We have so many farms around us that are still selling really good produce, and you kind of just eat what they're growing right now. So today we're going to start with nutrients that we would be deficient in and what foods have those, and then we're going to take all those foods and create one of my favorite recipes, which is minestrone. And we will use the produce from January. Okay, so nutrients that we tend to be deficient in January include vitamin C, vitamin D, potassium, and fiber. Vitamin C helps us protect our cells and keep them healthy. It helps maintain healthy skin, blood vessels, bones, and cartilage. It also helps us heal wounds when we get hurt. There's so much produce out there that has vitamin C. It's actually really easy to get the amount of vitamin C that we need each day. But in January specifically, there are greens like kale and spinach and parsley. Parsley is not always considered a green, but it has a lot of the same nutrients as your typical greens would, like kale and spinach. Everyone's favorite broccoli has lots of vitamin C in it. Cabbage, citrus is really good right now, especially the oranges. Chilies also have quite a bit of vitamin C in it. They're a little bit harder to find this time of year, but if you can, they're chock full of it. Vitamin C is a water-soluble vitamin, so eating it raw will allow you to get a lot more vitamin C than eating cooked produce. Depending on how you cook it will determine how much you lose in each item, but raw is always best anyways. So vitamin D helps us regulate calcium and phosphate. It helps keep bones, teeth, and muscles healthy. We like to call it the sunshine vitamin because that's exactly where it comes from, or the majority of it comes from, I should say. But at the same time, that's the reason why we tend to be deficient during the winter time, is because there's not as much sun and we're not going out nearly as much because it's so cold. There is quite a few foods that we can eat to help fill that requirement. They do tend to be a little bit fishy. Salmon, herring, sardines, and canned tuna has the most. Canned tuna, because fresh tuna is a little bit harder to find, and you can find canned tuna in pretty much any grocery store that you go to. Eggs has a bit of vitamin D in it, especially the yolks. Vitamin D is so important that they fortify a lot of foods with it, a lot of dairy products and cereal, soy milk, oat milk can be fortified with it, and some orange juices will be as well. The one type of produce that has by far the most amount of vitamin D in it are mushrooms. Crimini, which is little baby portobellas, regular portobellas, and white button mushrooms have the most. Crimini has so much vitamin D in it that you can get most of your daily requirement out of just 1 cup of it a day. Potassium is really important, and we tend to be deficient in it throughout the year. We need quite a bit of it for our bodies, so we can be deficient throughout the whole year. Winter, of course, is worse because we're just eating less produce. It helps us regulate fluids and contract our muscles. It controls nerve signals. It helps us lower our blood pressure and water retention, which in turn helps prevent stroke and osteoporosis and kidney stones. The types of produce that contain potassium are pretty hardy. Our squashes and our potatoes, especially white potatoes and sweet potatoes, and spinach, which we've already seen once on our list. I've added beans here because beans are readily available and easy to cook, and they're also really good for you. I use most often white beans and black beans in my cooking. So the last nutrient that we are going to discuss is fiber. It helps us keep our gut healthy by cleaning out the bacteria and the waste, helps keep you regular, you stay full longer, and it helps keep our blood sugar in check, which is pretty important. Pretty much all of the produce we've talked about today contains some amount of fiber in it. These items have the most out of the things we've talked about. White and black beans have by far tons of fiber in them. Broccoli, of course. Sweet potatoes, white potatoes. I've added carrots and beets here. We haven't discussed them, but they are very plentiful in this time of year, as well as having tons of beets, or tons of fiber in them. So we are going to use all those pieces of produce that we discussed, and we're going to make one of my favorite recipes, minestrone. I have definitely changed this from a traditional minestrone, so bear with me. This is my interpretation. So here's the recipe here, where I'm going to go ahead and demonstrate how to make this, and then at the very end of the video I will add this back, so that if you would like to make this at home, feel free. It's a very easy recipe. Okay, ready? And we're back, guys. We are all set up and ready to cook minestrone with all of our January vegetables. First, we're going to start with a big stock pot. I have 2 tablespoons of butter in here. I prefer butter in this recipe because it gives it a very full, creamy texture to it. It makes it feel a little bit more filling, especially as a vegetarian soup. You can easily replace that with a tablespoon of oil if you'd like, or less for that matter. So I'm going to go ahead and turn that on. About medium to medium high to get that started. So what we're going to start with is what's called mirepoix. And that is carrots, celery, and onion, if you can see that there. Typically you would have a 1-to-1 ratio. I really enjoy onions, so I have twice as much onion as everything else. Just a regular yellow onion or white onions, whichever you kind of prefer. So we are going to melt down that butter. So as we're waiting for that, any sort of carrot works fine. When it comes to celery, you typically get a stalk like this, and this recipe's 2 to 3 stalks. But what's really important about it, honestly, are these leaves. The leaves give it a very filling, comforting flavor. That's the flavor you get from chicken noodle soups. And this soup, of course, it's just really familiar flavor. So if you get a bunch like I did that doesn't have quite as many leaves as you want, what I will do is I'll take 1 or 2 outside stalks and then take one of these little bad boys. See all that yumminess right there? So I've already cut those up, and we are continuing to melt our butter. So we're going to go ahead and toss that in. And we're going to give that a stir so that everything gets a little bit of the butter on it. And go ahead and get that nice and warm. So we're going to saute this until the onions get a little bit translucent. We don't want to cook everything all the way down because we still have more produce to cook. But we do want to set this as a base layer. Now the smell and taste of the butter and the onions and the celery leaves, that's exactly where that homey, soupy deliciousness comes from. So this batch makes probably 6 to 8 servings. You can easily double it or triple it if you really want to, if you've got a big stock pot. But this is a really easy recipe to do on any sort of school night, work night. Honestly, what takes the longest is chopping all the vegetables. But what I like to do during the week is to pre-chop stuff. And you can just toss it in whatever you're making throughout the week. Okay, so that smells really, really good. So you will start seeing onions, not all of them, but it becomes a little bit more translucent. The carrots and the celery are following, but it's easier to see the change in the onions. Once you get a little bit of that, we're going to go ahead and add our garlic. Again, I add a little bit more than normal, a little bit more than you asked for. We give that a good stir, but we don't let it sit too long because we don't want garlic to burn. It will ruin the whole recipe. But between the butter and the liquid inside of the onions and all this stuff breaking down, it kind of helps the onion from burning. So next, before things do go too far, we're going to add our sweet potatoes. This was one medium to largish sweet potato. And we're just going to go ahead and add that in. And give it another stir. Now, this recipe, you can change the size of the cuts as long as everything's a similar size as each other. Some people like their vegetables bigger, smaller. I like a small medium. So it is chunky, but still soft and supple. So we just keep stirring that. We're about a medium high now because there is so much added and we're going fairly quickly. We don't want to leave this on its own for too long because it won't cook properly, honestly. So the sweet potato will slowly start to absorb the flavors, and it will also absorb the butter. So we also have some sliced mushrooms that are going to go in next. We have one, this was a really large Roma, so I went with that. And at the end, we're going to add some parsley. I got a really good bunch of fresh parsley. Dried is okay. You do need to add it in a lot sooner because it needs to rehydrate. But sometimes you can't find the really, really good stuff, and that's okay. So you will start to begin to see the sweet potatoes become a little paler, I guess. around the outside, and see the center is still a little bit really bright orange. It's hard to see. That's a good indication that you want to move on to the next item, which is our mushrooms. So when you're cooking mushrooms, if you've ever noticed, when you're sauteing them, or honestly anyway, they give off a lot of liquid. And these will do the same thing. And this helps continuing to saute and get things cooked down without letting anything burn at such a high temperature. Okay, so we let that go a little bit, and then we're going to go ahead and add our tomato, our white beans. I have cooked down some white beans. You can use canned, it's completely normal. I just had a big bag of white beans that needed to be cooked. They were calling my name. So if you cook your own white beans, I'm going to go ahead and add the water. I've added water today because that's what I have on hand. I added about 5 cups. A vegetable stock will keep this vegetarian, but a chicken stock works just as well. I added about 5 cups because I like my soup very thick and chunky. Okay, so we are going to go ahead and let this simmer for about 10 minutes, or let it come up to simmer, and let it go for about 10 minutes so everything gets cooked and kind of starts melding together. Hi guys, and we are back. So our soup has been simmering about 10 minutes, closer to 15 on this round. I did add a cup of water because I wanted it to be a little bit thinner. It was a little bit extra chunky this time. So at this point, everything is cooked. We've noticed that the sweet potatoes are soft and ready to eat. Now we're just going to season salt and pepper, of course. And this is to taste. Salt it as much as you would like to. The replacement salt is the alternative salt will work in this. Just make sure to get it completely in there and mix together and taste it before adding too much. It's always easier to start low and just add more. It's harder to subtract. There we go. That's ready to go. So now all that's left to do is shut it off. We're going to add the parsley and the cheese. We want to do those last because parsley is quite delicate and it doesn't require any cooking at all. You just eat it. But we do want it to get in the hot liquid and release its flavor into it a little bit. All right. So give that a stir. We have shut it off. Now we don't want to add cheese directly to the pot because cheese will curdle or separate, I suppose. It's just too hot. It will separate the fats from all the goodness. So this is what the beautiful chunkies look like. And that is with all the broth. Okay? You can mix and match all you would like. It's very easy to add different items like zucchini. I'll add zucchini in the fall time to this soup. A lot of minestrone has pasta in it, and we use the sweet potato in place of that. But again, you can cut the sweet potato, add some pasta back in, and or however you'd like it. There we go. So we're going to top our bowl, our individual bowls with the cheese. And I think it's worse closer. And that is our soup. All right, guys. Thanks for joining me. I'm going to put the menu or the recipe here at the end, and enjoy.